The night has a certain sound to it, one that only people who stay awake past midnight ever really notice. It's the sound of a world holding its breath. A silence thick enough to feel. A quiet so heavy you can almost hear your own heartbeat echo inside it. That's the silence I welcome you into tonight. Welcome, wanderer, to Haunted Graves After Dark. Before we descend into tonight's tale, tell me something. Where are you watching from? Drop your country, your city, your corner of the world in the comments. I read every one of them. I like knowing where my midnight travelers gather from. Now, let's dim the lights. Because tonight, we walk into a cemetery in Boston, 1965, where the dead were supposed to sleep still, where stone angels were carved to look peaceful, and where nothing, absolutely nothing, was meant to move. But something did. Something watched. And something followed. I want you to imagine a cold evening in early October. The kind of cold that reaches into your bones even though the calendar insists winter is still weeks away. Boston's street lamps flicker like tired sentries, throwing long slashes of yellow across the pavement. And on the very edge of the city, past rows of old brick buildings and rusted iron fences covered in ivy, sits Heroic Cemetery. It wasn't the largest graveyard in Massachusetts. It wasn't even the oldest. But it was the one people avoided once the sun dipped below the horizon. Locals said the wind there never stopped blowing, even on calm nights. They said you'd hear footsteps behind you when there was no one around. They said the statues felt wrong. Too lifelike. Too aware. Some swore the statues changed positions when no one was looking. Most dismissed it as superstition. But not everyone. The story I'm about to tell you begins with a man named Elias Ward, a quiet, thoughtful historian who spent more nights with dusty books than with people. Elias didn't believe in ghost stories. Not really. He believed in facts and dates, in historical patterns, in evidence. Which is why he never expected to be afraid of stone. That night, October 12, 1965, Elias entered Heroic Cemetery with a leather-bound journal tucked under his arm, a flashlight in his pocket, and a simple goal, to find the grave of a long-forgotten sculptor named Isadora Bellamy. She'd been famous in her time, brilliant even, carving statues so lifelike they seemed to breathe. But after her death in 1893, every sculpture she ever made was donated to Heroic. An entire collection scattered across the burial grounds. Elias was researching her for a book. He wasn't thinking about ghosts. He wasn't thinking about danger. He was thinking about art. But that's the thing about the supernatural, it doesn't wait for belief. It doesn't need permission. It just waits. The cemetery gate groaned as Elias pushed it open. Not the wind, a groan. A long, metallic moan that sounded almost human. He paused for a moment, flashlight in hand, before stepping inside. Gravestones leaned like crooked teeth. Moss-covered angels stood with outstretched wings. The night air was unmoving, and yet Elias felt cold brush against his spine, like fingertips. He ignored it. He followed the map he'd sketched earlier, weaving between headstones until he reached the older western section of the cemetery. That's where Isadora's sculptures stood, dozens of them, arranged in no particular order. Some were angels. Some were grieving women in flowing stone dresses. Some were statues of men with their hands folded. Others simply stood with empty eyes staring toward nothing. They were beautiful. Too beautiful. Elias lifted his flashlight. The beam landed on the largest statue of the lot. A man in a long coat, carved in unbelievable detail, down to the wrinkles around his eyes. His stone irises were polished smooth, catching the moonlight in a way that made them look wet. Alive. Elias wrote quickly in his journal. Statue number 23. Height 6 feet 4 inches. Possibly Bellamy's final work. Unsettling realism, eyes appear to follow movement. Must investigate sculpting method. He chuckled softly as he wrote that last line. Eyes appear to follow movement. Classic trick of shadow and perspective. At least, that's what he thought. He turned to inspect another sculpture. Something shifted behind him. Not a sound. Not footsteps. A shift. Presence. Wait. He spun around. The statue in the long coat stood exactly where it had been. Exactly. And yet. Elias felt certain, absolutely certain, that the head had been tilted slightly differently. Maybe toward the right. Maybe downward. He wasn't sure. He told himself he wasn't sure. He walked closer. The statue's eyes were carved with depth, shadowed perfectly, angled just so. Too perfect. Elias reached out and brushed dust from the stone cheek. Warm. He jerked his hand back. Stone should not feel warm at midnight. His heart thudded. He forced himself to breathe. It must have held heat from the day, he reasoned. Old stone does that sometimes. He tried to believe it. He stepped back again to look at the statue from a distance. The angle of the head had changed. It was unmistakable this time. It was looking right at him. Most sane people would have left right then. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It keeps fear from sinking its claws in. It tricks you into stepping closer instead of running. So Elias did the worst possible thing. He raised his flashlight, focused it on the statue's face, and spoke aloud. As if logic could protect him. Isadora Bellamy, he murmured, what were you trying to create? His light flickered. Just once. When it steadied, the statue's eyes seemed wider. No, not wider. More focused. More aware. Elias stumbled back, panic rising like a tide. His journal slipped from his grip and hit the ground. He scrambled to grab it, and froze. A whisper. Faint. Cold. Like breath sliding across the back of his ear. Don't look away. Elias spun around, heart slamming in his chest. No one there. No voice. No breath. Just the statue. Its hand was raised now. Raised, toward him. Elias ran. He didn't look back. Branches tore at his sleeves. Gravestones blurred past him. The cemetery gate loomed ahead. But as he neared it, the lights of Boston vanished behind him. The air thickened. The world dimmed. As if something didn't want him to leave. He burst through the gate and stumbled onto the street, falling to his knees. And when he finally dared to look back, the statue stood at the gate. It had followed him. Elias escaped that night. But what followed him home? That was another matter. Because once something carved in stone learns to move, it doesn't stop. And once it learns to watch, it doesn't blink. Elias Ward didn't remember how long he knelt outside the cemetery gate, gasping for breath as if someone had shoved ice into his lungs. His vision danced with dark spots. His heartbeat hammered against his ribs, wild and ragged, refusing to slow. It couldn't have happened. Stone does not move. Statues do not follow people. Yet the image of that tall, long-coated figure standing at the gate, only inches from stepping outside, burned into his mind like a brand. At some point, he realized his journal was still clutched against his chest, pages bent, edges dirt-smudged. But it was still there. Unlike his sanity. He forced himself to stand. The streets were quiet, the lamps flickering with their usual yellow haze. Nothing unnatural. Nothing impossible. Nothing watching him. He told himself he imagined the statue at the gate. Maybe the angle of the cemetery lights made it seem closer. Maybe adrenaline warped his perception. He told himself a lot of things that night. None of them were true. Elias lived in a small, second-floor apartment above a tailor shop in South Boston. Run down, drafty, barely furnished, he didn't care. It was close to the archives, close to the library, and close to the cemetery he'd never planned on visiting again. He double-checked the locks, once, twice, 3 times. Then he pushed a chair in front of the door. Then he shut all the curtains. Then he shut off every light except one. He placed his journal on the table and sat in front of it, staring at the cover as if it could find the answers for him. What could move stone? What could speak without a mouth? What could follow him without footsteps? The worst part wasn't the statue moving. It was the whisper. Don't look away. A message. A warning. Or a threat. Elias pressed his palms over his eyes. This is ridiculous, he muttered to no one. I'm a historian. I don't deal with hallucinations. But the memory felt solid. Too solid. He opened the journal. The last page he'd written had a faint smear of gray dust across it, stone dust. But something else caught his eye. Something he hadn't written. At the bottom of the page, in small, cramped handwriting, were 3 words. I see you. Elias jolted back so hard his chair knocked into the wall. No. No, no, no. He hadn't written that. The handwriting wasn't his. He grabbed the journal, flipping rapidly through the pages, every entry, every note, every margin. All normal. Just that one sentence. I see you. Fresh ink. Not smudged. Not old. As if someone, or something, had written it after he fled the cemetery. His breath quickened. His skin prickled with heat. His hands shook as he slammed the journal shut. He needed air. He needed water. He needed to convince himself that what he was experiencing had a rational explanation. He stepped into the kitchen. That's when he saw it. The window over the sink, curtain half drawn, a sliver of night visible. Two stone-gray eyes stared back in. Elias stumbled, choking on a shout. His shoulder hit the refrigerator door. His knees nearly gave out. The eyes didn't blink. Didn't shift. Didn't move. Just stared. Slowly, heart pounding, Elias reached for the curtain. His fingers trembled so violently that he almost couldn't grasp the fabric. Then, in one motion, he yanked the curtain fully aside. Nothing. The alley below was empty. The fire escape was empty. The sidewalk was empty. He pressed his forehead against the glass, panting. His breath fogged the cold surface. Was it his imagination? A reflection? A shadow trick? As he breathed against the window, something unexpected happened. The fog from his breath shifted. Not because of him, but because something outside breathed back. A cold patch of fog appeared on the other side of the glass. Directly opposite his mouth. Someone, or something, was breathing too. Elias stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. He grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, as if a lamp would defend him from whatever could breathe through stone. The fog spot stayed on the glass for several seconds. Then slowly, it smeared downward. Like a face pressing against it. Elias dropped the lamp. It clattered loudly on the floor. He backed into the hallway, chest heaving. He needed help. He needed answers. He needed someone who knew more about the Bellamy statues. And there was only one person. At 3:14 a.m., Elias stood on the doorstep of a small brownstone near Tremont Street. He knocked hard, 3 times, urgent, desperate. Footsteps inside. A click of a lamp. Then the door opened a crack. A woman's tired eyes peered out. Elias? Do you have any idea what time? It moved. Silence. What? The statue, Elias whispered. Bellamy's statue. The one with the coat. It moved. It followed me. Dr. Maren Locke, curator of the Boston Historical Museum and one of the last living experts on Isadora Bellamy, opened the door wider. Her hair was tied messily, glasses slightly crooked from sleep. But her expression was focused, sharp, concerned. Come inside, she said softly. He stepped in. She locked the door behind him. Tell me everything. He did. Every detail. Every shift of stone. Every whisper. Every breath against the glass. Maren didn't interrupt him once. When he finished, she folded her arms, pacing slowly across the living room. Finally, she spoke. Elias, there are stories about Bellamy's work. Not the public ones. The private ones. The kind that were passed down quietly, because no one wanted them recorded. He stared at her, throat dry. What kind of stories? Maren hesitated. Stories that she didn't just sculpt the dead, she sculpted with the dead. Elias shook his head. Meaning? Meaning she didn't carve statues to look real. Maren's voice dropped to a whisper. She carved them to contain something real. A chill sliced through Elias's spine. What kind of something? Maren met his gaze. Spirits. Souls. People who died violently. People who weren't at peace. She believed stone was a vessel. A prison. Elias felt himself go cold. No, he murmured. That's superstition. Folklore. Maren nodded slowly. I thought so too. Thought. She walked to a bookshelf and pulled down an old, cracked ledger. A leather strap kept it bound. She placed it on the table and slid it toward him. Elias hesitated before opening it. Inside were sketches, statues, faces, symbols, and notes in a looping script. Isadora Bellamy's personal journal. As Elias skimmed the pages, one entry made his blood run cold. Do not carve the eyes until the binding is complete. For once the eyes are open, the dead will see again. He looked up at Maren. She believed this. She lived by it, Maren replied. And the statue you described, the tall one, is believed to be her last creation. Rumors say she never finished binding it properly. What happens if the binding is incomplete? Maren hesitated. Elias, the spirit trapped inside may not remain trapped. The room seemed to tilt. And it followed me home, he whispered. Maren's eyes filled with fear, not disbelief, not shock. Real fear. Elias, did you speak to it? He swallowed. Yes. What did it say? He hesitated. It said. Don't look away. Maren paled. Oh God. What? Elias demanded. Isadora wrote about that phrase. It was the warning her unfinished statues gave to their last victims. Victims? Elias repeated, voice cracking. Maren nodded. Whoever looks away first becomes the target, because the spirit can move closer when unseen. Elias staggered back from the table. And when it reaches you, he whispered. Maren closed the journal. People disappeared, Elias. Bellamy's unfinished statues were blamed. No bodies. No traces. Just vanished. He felt his stomach drop. Maren, what do I do? Before she could answer. A soft tap echoed across the room. Tap. 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 From the window behind them. Maren froze. Elias didn't breathe. Tap. 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 A slow, deliberate rhythm. Like stone fingers. Maren gestured for Elias to stay back. She crept toward the window, steps measured, breath tight. The tapping stopped. Slowly, so slowly, she pulled back the curtain. And gasped. Elias rushed to her side. There, on the outside of the glass, was a handprint. A stone handprint. Gray dust clung to the pane. Cracks spidered outward from the center. Elias's pulse surged. It's here, he whispered. It found me. Maren grabbed his arm. We need to leave. Now. It can't come inside unless. A sharp crack sliced through the air. The same window fractured deeper. Spiderweb cracks. A shape shifted behind the glass. Tall. Still. Watching. Not outside now. Closer. Right at the window. Maren's voice trembled. Unless it locks eyes with you. Elias stepped back. Too late. Because as the glass splintered apart, and moonlight spilled into the room. The statue's face appeared. And its eyes. Its impossible, living, gleaming eyes. Found his. Elias's breath caught. A force, cold, immense, ancient, pressed into his mind. His knees buckled. His vision hazed around the edges. The statue remained frozen in place, half emerged through the window frame, shards of glass clinging to its coat. But its eyes moved. Left. Right. Down. Back to him. Following his every breath. Maren grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. Don't look away. Elias, listen to me. Don't look away. The statue's mouth shifted. Stone cracked. Stone groaned. Something inside was trying to reshape itself into something human. A whisper slid into Elias's ear. I told you not to run. His eyes widened. His muscles locked. Every instinct told him to flee, to scream, to do anything but stare. But he didn't dare look away. He couldn't. Maren pulled him backward, trying to break its gaze. And that's when the statue lifted its arm. Not slowly. Not jerkily. But smoothly. With purpose. It pointed at Elias. Not Maren. Not the room. Only him. Maren's voice cracked. We need to get out, now. Elias forced his limbs to move, stumbling as Maren dragged him toward the back door. Behind them, the statue pressed deeper through the broken window frame, stone grinding against stone, cracks racing down its arms like lightning. It was coming inside. It was coming for him. They burst into the alley behind the house. Cold air hit their faces. Maren slammed the door behind them and grabbed Elias's hand. Run. He did. Over puddles. Between trash bins. Past brick walls echoing with his own footsteps. Behind him. Another set of footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Grinding. Stone. Following. Always following. He didn't look back. Not once. Even when he felt the air behind him shift. As if something tall was inches away. Reaching. Marin pulled him around a corner. A narrow side street. Dark. Empty. They stopped, panting. Then. Silence. Just their breathing. Just the wind. Not the statue. Not the footsteps. At least, not anymore. Marin pressed her back against the wall, catching her breath. It won't stop, she whispered. Not until we break the binding. How? Elias rasped. She shook her head. I don't know. But before Elias could respond, a shadow stretched across the brick wall beside them. Tall. Broad. Unmoving. Elias's blood froze. Slowly, so slowly, he turned toward the mouth of the alley. The statue stood there. Not moving. Not breathing. But watching. Always watching. And when Elias blinked, it was suddenly closer. Elias Ward had felt fear before. Fear of deadlines. Fear of disappointing his mentors. Fear of losing old manuscripts. But none of that prepared him for this. This was a different kind of fear. A fear older than speech. Older than history. Older than anything carved in stone. The statue stood motionless at the mouth of the alley, its long coat dusted with brick fragments, its stone jaw cracked from forcing its way through Marin's window. Its eyes glimmered like polished obsidian. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It only watched Elias. And the longer it stared, the more Elias felt something pulling at him, like invisible strings attached to his spine, tugging, drawing him toward the creature as if he belonged to it. Marin grabbed his wrist. Don't blink, she whispered. And don't look away. Elias nodded weakly. But his eyes burned from the dryness. His pulse hammered behind them. He blinked instinctively. And the statue moved. Just an inch. But enough. Elias felt his stomach twist. Marin, he whispered. We can't stay here. We won't. She tightened her grip on his wrist. On my count. 3, 2, 1, now. They sprinted through the alley. Their footsteps slapped the pavement, fast, frantic, terrified. The statue's footsteps followed them. Not running. Not even hurrying. Just walking. Slow. Steady. Inevitable. Like it knew they couldn't escape. They shot out of the alley into a wider street. A car horn blared as a taxi swerved around them. The driver cursed, a string of accented insults, but Marin didn't stop running. Neither did Elias. When they reached the corner, Marin ducked into a narrow stone stairwell leading to the basement of an abandoned bakery. She shoved open the door, pulled Elias inside, and slammed it shut. The moment the lock clicked, the footsteps stopped. Silence. Elias pressed his back against the wall, chest heaving. What is happening to me? He whispered. Why is it following me? Marin didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved through the dark basement, lighting a dusty oil lamp she found on a counter. The flame flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. She took a breath. We're going to need help. From who? Elias asked. Marin hesitated. From the only person who ever spoke with Isadora Bellamy about her statues. Elias frowned. Bellamy died in 1893. This man didn't speak to her when she was alive, Marin said. He spoke to her, after. Silence stretched between them. After? Elias repeated. Marin nodded. He called himself a medium. Said he could hear the dead. Most people dismissed him as a fraud. Maybe he was. But he claimed Isadora visited him in dreams for months after her death. What did she tell him? Elias whispered. Marin took a shaky breath. That she made a mistake. That she trapped something in stone she shouldn't have. Elias's blood chilled. And this medium, what's his name? Is he still alive? Marin shook her head. He died in 1932. But his grandson still lives in Boston. People say he inherited the ability. Elias swallowed hard. What's his address? Marin gave him a tight, grim smile. That's the easy part. She clicked off the lamp. The hard part is getting there without being seen. They waited 15 minutes, 15 painfully slow minutes with every creak of the basement making Elias flinch. Then they climbed the stone steps back to the street. The night wind was sharp. Cold. Too cold. Elias's breath fogged the air. But something else fogged it too. A second breath. Behind him. Lower. Heavier. He spun around. Nothing there. Marin grabbed his arm. Don't lose focus. The statue. Won't move if you're looking. Then where the hell is it? Elias demanded. Marin looked around the empty street. It doesn't need to walk the same paths we do. Elias stared at her. What does that mean? It means, she whispered, it can take shortcuts. A chill crawled down his spine. Shortcuts, through what? She hesitated. Through shadow. Before he could respond, a low grinding sound echoed from the rooftops above them. Stone on stone. Elias slowly lifted his eyes. On the edge of a building, half hidden in the moonlight. The statue stood. Looking down at him. Its head tilted slightly. As if curious. As if studying him. Marin pulled him by the sleeve. Move. Now. They ran. The statue didn't jump. Didn't climb down. Didn't chase. It simply disappeared when they turned the corner. Vanished. As if the shadows themselves swallowed it. The medium's grandson lived in a part of Boston most people avoided after dark, narrow wooden houses, uneven cobblestone streets, roofs sagging from decades of storms. The number on the mailbox was faded. The porch slanted left. A dim orange light glowed from a window on the second floor. Elias and Marin approached cautiously. Before they could knock, the door creaked open. An elderly man with long white hair and deep-set eyes stared at them. You brought something with you, he said softly. Elias's breath caught. The old man stepped aside. Come inside before it arrives. Elias didn't hesitate. Neither did Marin. The door slammed shut behind them. The old man locked it. Bolted it. Then slid a heavy iron bar across the frame. Sit, he said. They sat at a round wooden table cluttered with candles, old photographs, and a set of tarnished brass keys. The old man pressed his palms flat on the table. I'm Thomas Bellamy. Elias froze. Bellamy. As in. Yes, the man said. Isadora was my grandmother. Elias's pulse raced. You knew about the statues, he whispered. Thomas nodded. I spent my childhood surrounded by things that should not move. Stones that hummed in the night. Figures that changed expression while no one was looking. My grandmother believed she was preserving souls. She didn't realize she was trapping monsters. Elias leaned forward. Why is the statue following me? Thomas stared at him, unblinking. Because you woke it. Elias shook his head. I didn't do anything. You looked at it, Thomas said. You acknowledged it. You saw it. Marin frowned. Plenty of people saw the statues. Not like he did, Thomas said, pointing at Elias. Most look past them. Most see stone. But you saw something alive. Elias felt his stomach twist. I didn't mean to. No one ever does, Thomas replied. Can it be stopped? Elias asked. Thomas rose from the table. His body stiff, joints creaking. There is only one way. He disappeared into a side room. Elias heard drawers opening, metal clinking, pages rustling. Then Thomas returned holding something Elias hadn't expected. A chisel. And a small mallet. Old. Heavy. Iron. This, Thomas said, placing it on the table, is the chisel my grandmother used to break her first mistake. Marin's eyes widened. She destroyed one of her own statues. No, Thomas whispered. She tried. Silence filled the room. What happened? Elias whispered. Thomas looked him directly in the eyes. It destroyed her instead. Elias went cold. What does that mean? Thomas leaned forward. What follows you is not a statue. It is a trapped spirit that learned to wear stone as a body. You can chip away the stone, but you can't destroy the thing inside with tools. Then why give me the chisel? Because you don't need to destroy the spirit, Thomas whispered. You need to break the eyes. Elias blinked. The eyes? Thomas nodded. As long as the eyes are intact, the spirit will always see you. Always find you. Always reach you. Destroy the eyes, and the connection breaks. Elias swallowed. That easy? Thomas's face darkened. It will not let you get close enough. And if you break eye contact, even for a moment, it will be on you before your next breath. Elias looked at the chisel. The metal gleamed faintly in the candlelight. It wants me, Elias whispered. Why? Thomas took a deep breath. Because unfinished spirits hunger for the person who woke them. They need an anchor. A host. Elias's pulse spiked. You mean it wants to? Yes, Thomas said. Take you. Where you? Become you. Marin grabbed Elias's hand. We won't let that happen. Thomas shook his head. You don't understand. Once it chooses, it doesn't stop. A sudden noise echoed from outside. 3 knocks. Slow. Even. Heavy. Thomas froze. No, he whispered. Not so soon. The door shook a little. Knock. 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 Marin's grip tightened around Elias's hand. Thomas blew out the candles. Total darkness swallowed the room. Don't move, Thomas whispered. Don't breathe loudly. Don't look at the windows. Knock. Knock. Silence. Elias's heart thudded in his throat. The floorboards creaked from the porch. Something stepped closer. The door frame groaned under a weight pressing against it. A voice, low, cracking, wrong, slid into Elias's ear. You shouldn't have run. Marin squeezed his arm. Thomas reached blindly for Elias's hand, forcing the cold iron chisel into his grip. Take it, Thomas whispered. When the time comes, you'll know. Elias gripped the chisel with trembling fingers. Another knock. So hard dust rained from the ceiling. Thomas rose from his chair. Stay here. No. Elias hissed. You can't face that thing alone. But Thomas had already stepped toward the door. He pressed his palm against it. His voice trembled. Grandmother, forgive me. The door buckled inward. Splinters exploded outward. A cold wind rushed into the house. And in the moonlit doorway, the statue stood. Its eyes glowed faintly. Its jaw unhinged. Its hand reached forward. Elias tried to move. But the statue looked directly at him. And his body froze. A force stronger than fear. Stronger than pain. Stronger than will. The statue stepped over the broken doorframe, raising its arm toward Elias. Thomas leaped between them, shouting. Take me instead. The statue paused. Turned its head. And slowly, impossibly. It smiled. Not a human smile. A crack widening across stone. Thomas gasped. No, no, not me. The statue placed its hand on Thomas's chest. Stone fingers sank into flesh. Blood splattered. Marin screamed. Elias tried to move. To leap forward. To stop it. But he couldn't. Because the statue's eyes held him captive. He could only watch. Thomas Bellamy collapsed to the floor, lifeless before he hit the ground. The statue turned its gaze back to Elias. And whispered. Your turn. The statue took one more step toward Elias, its stone feet cracking the wooden floor beneath it. The room smelled like dust, old candle smoke, and blood. Thomas Bellamy's body lay crooked on the floorboards, his lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Elias couldn't move. He couldn't blink. He couldn't breathe. The statue's gaze held him in place like invisible chains. Marin screamed behind him, but the sound felt far away, like he was underwater, sinking deeper, lungs burning, mind fading. The statue raised its hand toward Elias's face. Its stone fingers curled, slow, deliberate. It wasn't just reaching. It was choosing the best place to begin. Elias could hear it inside his head now, stony whispers, scraping, grinding, a voice made of broken rock and stolen breath. You saw me. You belong to me. Elias's heart slammed in his chest. His throat tightened. He felt himself leaning forward, though his legs didn't move. As if something was pulling him, calling him, welcoming him into the cold. Marin moved first. She grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the table and hurled it at the statue's head. The lamp smashed against the stone face, sending an explosion of sparks across the room, but the statue didn't flinch, didn't even shift its weight. It continued walking toward Elias. Marin didn't stop. She screamed, lunged, and grabbed Elias's arm with both hands, trying to yank him backward. Move! Elias, move! But he couldn't. His muscles were locked. His legs refused to listen. His eyes were glued to the statues. Every second he stared, the world darkened at the edges. His hearing dulled. His chest felt tighter. He realized with horrifying clarity. It was draining him. Feeding. Pulling pieces of him out through his eyes. Marin slapped him, hard. Elias gasped. Just enough movement for one thought to break through the fog. The chisel. Thomas had given him the chisel. Elias' right hand twitched. Then it moved. Barely. But it moved. The statue noticed. Its head snapped downward toward the chisel, its stone eyes narrowing, mouth widening like a crack splitting deeper. Marin shouted, Elias. Now. Go. Elias broke free, just enough to take one step back. The statue lunged. Not fast. Not running. Just, suddenly closer. Elias felt its cold breath, impossible, wrong, like winter exhaling. He gripped the chisel with both hands and swung at its face. But the statue caught his wrist midair. The grip felt like a vice made of tombstone. Pain shot through Elias's arm, blinding and sharp. The statue leaned close, its stone forehead touching Elias's. He felt its thoughts sliding into his skull like needles of ice. You cannot break what sees you. Its voice rattled inside his bones, felt rather than heard. The stone fingers tightened. Elias screamed. Marin grabbed a wooden chair, raised it high, and smashed it across the statue's back. The chair shattered, splinters flying through the air. The statue didn't react. But the distraction shifted its gaze, just for a moment. Elias collapsed onto his knees, gasping. The statue turned toward Marin, head tilting with slow, eerie curiosity. It whispered. Do not interfere. Marin stepped back, eyes wide, terrified, but she didn't run. Elias forced himself upright. His arm throbbed. His vision blurred. But he still had the chisel. He remembered what Thomas said. Destroy the eyes. So he charged. He grabbed the statue's coat, pulled himself up, and thrust the chisel straight toward its left eye. The statue turned just in time. The chisel scraped its cheek, sparks flying. Not enough. Not even close. The statue grabbed Elias by the throat. His feet lifted off the ground. He gagged, clawing at the stone fingers crushing his windpipe. The statue whispered. You are weak. But I can fix that. Elias's vision turned white around the edges. His lungs burned. His limbs went numb. He felt himself slipping. Then a deafening crack shattered the moment. The window behind the statue exploded inward as something heavy slammed through it, a storm of glass and wood. The statue dropped Elias instantly. He hit the floor hard, coughing, choking, gasping air. He blinked tears from his eyes. The figure that crashed through the window rolled once across the floor and stood. It was a woman. Tall. Weathered. Dressed in a long dark coat covered in chalk dust and stone powder. And she carried a sledgehammer. Marin stared. Who the hell? But Elias already knew. His voice cracked. Isadora. Bellamy. The woman didn't deny it. She didn't even look at them. Her eyes were fixed on the statue. Her creation. Her mistake. The statue stepped backward, the floorboards groaning under its weight. Isadora raised the sledgehammer. You don't belong in this world. The statue's stone jaw opened wider. A sound like 1,000 whispering graves poured out. Isadora swung. The hammer struck the statue's arm. A thunderous boom. And the stone cracked, a deep fracture zigzagging down to its elbow. The statue recoiled. Elias had never seen it react to pain. Maybe it could be hurt. Maybe there was a chance. But Isadora didn't give it time. She swung again. Boom. This time at the statue's ribs. More cracks split across its torso like lightning on stone. The statue hissed, an ugly, ancient sound. Isadora glared. You should have stayed buried. The statue lunged at her, hand outstretched, but she sidestepped with surprising speed for someone so old. Keep your eyes closed, she shouted at Elias and Marin. If it catches your gaze, you're already lost. They obeyed instantly. Elias squeezed his eyes shut. Marin too. They heard the hammer crash again. And again. And again. Each strike echoed through the house like thunder. Cracks deepened. Stone shattered. But then. A new sound. A low, resonant hum. Growing. Building. Vibrating the floorboards beneath Elias's feet. Isadora gasped. No, no, not yet. The hum grew louder, roaring, pulsing, ripping through the air. The statue's body began to glow through the cracks. A sickly, cold white light. Isadora shouted, "Get back." Elias opened his eyes, just a slit. The statue wasn't breaking. It was shedding. Chunks of stone fell away, crashing to the floor. Revealing something moving underneath. Something alive. Pale. Wet. Like a body half-formed from clay and bone. It kept peeling itself out of the stone husk, claws tearing through its old shell. Marin screamed. Isadora swung the hammer one final time, but the creature inside burst free, knocking her backward across the room. Her hammer flew from her grasp. Elias stared in horror. The new creature stood tall, taller than the statue had been. Its limbs were long, twisted. Its body cracked and dripping with thick, gray fluid. Its eyes burned like frozen stars. But worst of all, it wasn't looking at Elias. It was smelling him. Searching. Choosing. The creature stretched its neck toward him, bones creaking. Its voice was colder than before. Sharper. More alive. Now. I see you. It lunged. Isadora threw herself between them, pushing Elias aside. The creature slammed into her instead, pinning her against the wall. She cried out, loud, pained. Run, she screamed at Elias and Marin. But. Elias yelled. Run. Now. The creature turned its head toward Elias again, sniffing, reaching, hungry. Isadora grabbed its shoulders, trying to hold it back. You want a host? She snarled. Take me, then. The creature froze. Its burning eyes locked onto her. For a moment, Elias thought it might listen. But then it spoke in a low, rippling voice. You are already dead. It threw her aside. Isadora's body struck the far wall and slumped, unmoving. Elias's stomach twisted. No, 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 Isadora. Marin grabbed his arm. Elias, move. The creature stalked toward them, slow, deliberate. Searching. Selecting. The burning in its eyes matched the burning in Elias's skull. Somewhere deep inside him. It had already begun the bond. Elias ran. He grabbed Marin's hand and bolted through the back hallway, down the narrow stairs, and into the cold night air behind the house. Snow was falling, slow, silent flakes drifting from the black sky. The creature burst through the door behind them, splintering wood, sending shards across the grass. It stepped into the snow. Steam rose around its feet, cold meeting colder. Elias pulled Marin around the corner and sprinted across the yard toward a line of old tool sheds. The creature followed, each step shaking the ground. Marin gasped, panting. We can't outrun it. I know. Then what do we do? Elias stopped. Turned. Raised the chisel. Marin stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Elias, no. He stepped forward anyway. He knew what Thomas said. Destroy the eyes. But the thing watching him now wasn't stone. Its eyes were alive. Living. Sensitive. Breakable. The creature hissed. It crouched low. Ready to pounce. Elias braced himself. I'm not your host, he whispered. Not tonight. The creature leaped. Its claws outstretched. Its jaw unhinged. Its eyes burning. Elias drove the chisel upward. Straight toward one of the glowing eyes. The creature shrieked. A scream of pure fury. And twisted its head just in time. The chisel missed. The two crashed into the snow, rolling across the cold ground, tangled, thrashing. The creature's claws scraped across Elias's ribs, burning lines of pain spreading instantly. Elias screamed. Marin shouted his name. The creature reared back to strike again. But Elias swung the chisel blindly in panic. The iron tip slashed across the creature's face. Not the eye. But close. It howled. Elias scrambled backward, pushing himself through the snow. The creature lunged again. A gunshot exploded from behind Elias. The creature jerked. Stumbled. Turned its head. Another gunshot. And another. Marin stood behind Elias, gripping Thomas's old shotgun with both shaking hands. She fired again. The creature staggered but didn't fall. It stared at Marin with pure hatred. Then at Elias. Then at the chisel. Its body flickered. Like a lantern flame in wind. It backed away, slowly. Into the shadow of the shed. And then. It vanished. Not ran. Not crawled. It blinked out of existence. Leaving the snow steaming where it stood. Elias collapsed, clutching his ribs. Marin dropped the shotgun and rushed toward him, tears in her eyes. Elias, oh my God, are you? He winced. Alive. I think. He looked at the chisel in his bloody hand. The iron was cracked. Bent. Barely intact. But so was he. Marin helped him stand. Where did it go? She whispered. Elias shook his head. I don't know. Then he looked toward Thomas's shattered house. Toward the broken window. The crushed door. Isadora's unmoving body inside. And he whispered. But it's not done. Marin swallowed hard. It wants you. Elias closed his eyes. A pulse of icy pain throbbed in the back of his skull. Like a whisper echoing through bone. He opened his eyes again. It's not just after me. Marin frowned. What do you mean? Elias looked around the snow-covered yard, breath trembling. In the distance. Just for a moment. He saw a shadow move between the gravestones. Not walking. Not running. Hunting. He whispered. It's getting stronger. Marin grabbed his hand. Then what do we do? We can't face that thing again. Elias stared at the bleeding chisel. At the shadows creeping closer. At the graveyard waiting beyond the fence. We follow it, he said quietly. Marin recoiled. Elias, no, we should leave, hide. We follow it, he repeated. Because now I understand. Understand what? Marin whispered. Elias turned toward the cemetery. The wind stilled. The snow fell silently. The creature's whispered words echoed in his skull. You saw me. Elias whispered back. I wasn't the first. He tightened his grip on the chisel. And I won't be the last. Marin stared at him, pale and terrified. Elias, what are you saying? He stepped forward. Toward the graveyard. Toward the shadows. Toward the monster. I'm saying, Elias whispered. This thing has a history. And if we don't learn it, Boston won't survive it. The wind howled. Something moved among the gravestones. Waiting. Watching. Calling. Elias exhaled a shaky breath. Let's finish what Thomas started. The snow crunched beneath Elias's boots as he and Marin sprinted across the cemetery grounds, the pale moonlight reflecting off broken gravestones. His ribs burned where the creature's claws had raked him, but the adrenaline overrode the pain. Behind them, the cold night air held a silence so thick it pressed against their ears. The statue, the creature, Isadora's corpse, they were gone. Or so he thought. Marin stopped abruptly, her breath fogging in the freezing air. Where are we going? She whispered, panic threading her voice. Elias shook his head. I don't know, but we can't stay here. Not tonight. Not after what just happened. His eyes scanned the yard, still wary. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the tombstones. Something was moving, but it wasn't the creature. Not yet. He remembered Thomas's lifeless body inside the shattered house. The brass chisel still clutched in his hand. The memory made his stomach twist. But a faint instinct whispered that something about Thomas was wrong. You don't think Thomas, Marin began, glancing at him with wide eyes. Elias swallowed hard. I don't know what to think anymore. But there's something about that man, something I missed. Something alive. They approached the old wrought iron gate, snow sticking to its rusted bars. Elias's steps slowed. His gut screamed at him. He stopped, feeling a subtle vibration beneath his boots, like faint, imperceptible heartbeat vibrations coming from under the earth itself. Then he saw it. A figure standing in the shadows between the graves. Tall. Familiar. Moving in a way that made the snow bend unnaturally around it. Elias froze. Marin's hand gripped his arm so tightly he felt the bones press together. It was Thomas. Alive. But wrong. His grandfatherly face was smeared with dirt and blood. His eyes, they weren't Thomas's. Not entirely. There was a pale, frozen gleam in them, like obsidian trapped inside flesh. Thomas? Elias whispered, stepping forward cautiously. The man tilted his head, the movement slow, deliberate, unnatural. Then he smiled, or tried to. The expression twisted across his face in ways human muscles weren't meant to allow. You shouldn't have run, the voice said. But it wasn't Thomas's. Not fully. A deep, grinding undertone layered beneath the familiar tone. Something older, colder, darker. Marin stepped in front of Elias. Stay back, she shouted, raising the shotgun again. Her hands shook. Thomas, or what wore Thomas's body now, ignored her. His gaze locked on Elias. You've seen too much. You've been chosen. Elias's chest tightened. The chisel in his pocket felt heavier than ever. Chosen? By what? He demanded, though part of him already knew. The figure took a step forward. Snow crunched under his boots. But every movement carried a stiffness that should have been impossible in a living human. Something was inhabiting him. Something that had once been the statue. Something that had left the stone shell to find a new vessel. I can stop it, Elias said, voice shaking. I can use the chisel. The figure laughed. Or tried to. The sound rattled through the air like shards of glass grinding against bone. Stop it, he said. You cannot stop me. I am not the statue anymore. I am the first. I am the last. And I am hungry. Elias staggered back. The wind bit at his face. Snow whipped against him, but he barely noticed. His eyes narrowed, fixed on the chisel. Marin tugged him backward. Elias. Don't do it. You'll. He ignored her. His fingers wrapped around the cold iron. The weight anchored him. He drew in a deep breath. If you want me, you'll have to pass through me first. The figure tilted his head. The obsidian eyes flared. You think I am Thomas. But Thomas was never mine. Only a vessel. A shadow of what I am. And you are the anchor I need next. Elias's stomach dropped. Anchor. The thing smiled, or tried to, and stepped closer. With each movement, the air seemed to thicken. Elias could feel his pulse slowing unnaturally, his breath catching. He remembered Thomas's warnings. Destroy the eyes. Cut the connection. Sever the anchor. The figure stopped, studying Elias like a predator savoring a slow kill. Then, without warning, it lunged. Elias raised the chisel, swinging blindly. Metal screeched against flesh and stone, but the strike connected. Something wet and cold splashed onto his hands. The creature shrieked, staggering back. Marin fired the shotgun again. The blast shook the night air. The figure staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, the obsidian gleam in its eyes shifted, became sharper, brighter, more focused. Elias realized, panic rising, the figure wasn't alone. It was splitting its essence. The shadow from the statue, the spirit that had left Isadora's creation, had merged with Thomas, but it could now divide, appear in multiple forms. He backed toward a gravestone. The snow around him melted slightly under his weight, an unnatural warmth spreading like blood. The figure advanced again. You cannot stop what is already awake. Every strike, every bullet, every chisel, only strengthens me. Every moment you hesitate, you feed me more. Elias's fingers tightened around the chisel. He could hear Marin behind him, her own breathing ragged, the shotgun still in hand. The entity's whispering reached inside his skull now, coiling around his thoughts, see me, belong to me. He shook his head violently. No. The figure lunged a second time, faster. Elias swung the chisel again. This time, he aimed not for the eyes, he aimed for the heart, or whatever served as its core inside Thomas's body. The chisel sank in. The entity howled, a sound that seemed to split reality. Snow exploded into the air around them. Gravestones cracked, stone dust rising like fog. But it didn't die. It only faltered. The obsidian eyes flickered, and for the first time, Elias saw a glimpse of Thomas's real self, buried deep beneath the consuming shadow. The grandfather he had known, trapped, terrified, screaming silently inside his own body. Elias's stomach twisted with guilt. "I don't want to kill him," he whispered. "I just want it out." The shadow Thomas hissed, and the world seemed to tremble. It lunged again, claws out, dragging Elias backward through the snow. Marin screamed and fired again. This time, the pellet struck something solid, and the creature stumbled. Elias seized the moment. With a primal yell, he plunged the chisel into the glowing obsidian eye, twisting it. The figure shrieked in unearthly pain. The blackness that had taken Thomas's body writhed visibly, as though the snow itself was alive and bleeding. Thomas's body collapsed to the ground, gasping. Smoke-like wisps peeled from the cracks in his skin as the spirit struggled, resisting. Elias and Marin fell to their knees beside him, exhausted and terrified. The shadow entity, shrieking in rage, poured out of Thomas and swirled above them, a black, glimmering cloud, pulsating with hatred. Its form shifted, revealing flashes of the statue, Isadora, and countless half-formed bodies, all merged into a singular consciousness. Elias realized then that the statue, the creature, Isadora, none of it had been the real threat. This was the original entity, and it had only been using them all to find a host strong enough to survive it. The snow around them began to swirl violently, funneling into the shadow. The entity's eyes, if it had eyes, fixed on Elias. Its voice thundered in his mind, "You will be mine, anchor, forever." Elias gripped the chisel tighter. "I won't let you," he whispered, feeling his resolve harden. Marin grabbed his shoulder. "Do it. Do whatever Thomas told you." The last memory of Thomas came flooding back. Destroy the eyes. Sever the connection. Break the anchor. Elias swung the chisel high, aiming for the mass of darkness swirling in the air above them. Sparks of cold blue light erupted as the metal struck the first concentrated cluster of blackness. The entity screamed. The sound shredded the silence of the cemetery. Snow turned to steam as the darkness writhed violently. Gravestones split and cracked under the energy released. The shadow entity lunged, twisting, splitting into fragments, each one screaming in anger. Elias plunged the chisel into another pulse of blackness. The force slammed him backward. Marin shielded him instinctively, taking shards of ice and stone to her coat. The entity wailed, a sound so piercing it made Elias's teeth ache. Then, gradually, the blackness began to condense, drawn into itself, shrinking, until it forced itself into a single concentrated point above Thomas's body. Thomas coughed, gasping, eyes wide, finally free of the entity's possession. He looked at Elias and Marin, trembling. It will return," he whispered. "One day, it will find another anchor." The snow stilled. The shadows faded. The wind calmed. Elias dropped to his knees, chest heaving, shivering, covered in snow, ice, and sweat. Marin collapsed beside him, gasping. Elias looked at Thomas, alive but broken. He looked at the shattered chisel in his hand. And he realized the terrifying truth. They had won, for now. But the cemetery, Boston, the world itself, had only been delayed. The entity was still out there. Still waiting. Still hungry. And one day, it would come for the next anchor. Elias, Marin, and Thomas stood among shattered gravestones, snow crunching beneath their feet, the night sky cold and silent. The entity, the shadow that had haunted them, controlling statues and possessing men, was no longer physically present. But the air itself hummed with its threat, a quiet tension that pressed against their ears and hearts. Thomas shivered, finally speaking, "It isn't gone. Not truly. It's only contained. For now." Elias tightened his grip on the broken chisel. "Then we have to make sure it can never return. No anchor, no host, nothing." Marin swallowed hard. "How? How do you fight something that can possess anyone, anything?" Thomas looked at her, eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. "The entity doesn't just occupy a body. It feeds off connection. Attention. Recognition. It needs someone to anchor its presence, and it finds them through proximity to its past victims. Graves. Statues. Anyone who's witnessed it. Elias's stomach twisted. So. Boston is full of anchors now. We just fought one, but there could be more. Thomas nodded. Exactly. That cemetery, the statue, it was only one node in a network. It's been growing for decades. Each piece of stone it possessed, each person it consumed, created another link. And we just survived one of its most concentrated forms. Marin's hands shook. So what do we do? Run. Hide. No, Elias said, determination hardening his tone. We fight. We finish this. Tonight. The wind shifted, carrying a cold, whispering voice. Snow swirled unnaturally. Elias froze. It's here, he whispered. It knows we're trying to stop it. Thomas gestured toward the shadows between the tombstones. It always knows. That's why we have to be clever. Traps, containers, the entity can't fully inhabit something already destroyed. Elias nodded, recalling the chisel and the shattered statue. Then we use what we have. We break its anchors. One by one. Marin's eyes widened. That sounds insane. How do you even start? Thomas's expression grew grim. We start with the source, the original creation. Isadora's ritual. That house, the statue, the first body it possessed, it's the key. They moved silently through the cemetery toward the ruins of Thomas Bellamy's house. Moonlight glinted off splintered wood, broken glass, and snow-dusted debris. The front door lay in jagged shards. Inside, the remnants of Isadora's work awaited, the smashed furniture, shards of stone, and traces of the dark energy that had poured from the statue. Elias stepped carefully, the broken chisel in hand. It's like walking through its fingerprints, he muttered. Every step, it's watching, judging. Thomas nodded. It always is. A low, grinding noise emanated from the shadows. Elias froze. Marin raised the shotgun, trembling. And then, from the corner of the ruined room, movement emerged. The entity. Not in full form, yet. Just a flicker of black mist, weaving like smoke through the shattered floorboards. But Elias could feel its presence, pressing against him, whispering, "Anchor, yours, mine." Elias gritted his teeth. No. Not this time. He struck the chisel into the floorboards where the first statue had been mounted. Sparks of blue energy erupted as the stone met metal. The mist shrieked, recoiling slightly. Thomas took a step forward. It's trying to escape, to find another anchor. We have to trap it. Marin shook her head. How? Thomas gestured to a large metal chest in the corner, old and rusted but intact. This chest was part of Isadora's ritual. She used it to store energy nodes. Whatever remains of the entity can be bound in here if we can force it. Elias nodded. He swung the chisel again, striking the floor near the mist. The dark form recoiled, hissed, and surged toward him. It tried to possess him, snake-like tendrils of shadow curling around his limbs and mind. Pain shot through his skull. He screamed but held his ground, pushing the chisel down hard into the mist. The entity writhed. Its form flickered and elongated, its whispers echoing in the walls, in their ears, inside their minds. Anchor, broken, consumed, you will belong. Thomas stepped forward, chanting softly, words from the old journal he had kept hidden for decades. The words resonated in the room, shaking dust from the ceiling, and the mist screamed in agony. Its tendrils recoiled, pulsing violently. Elias thrust the chisel into the metal chest. Sparks flew. The mist writhed, drawn toward the box. It shrieked, a sound that split the air. Marin slammed the chest shut. It rattled violently, glowing faintly with dark energy. The mist collided with the chest, trying to escape, but Thomas and Elias pushed it down. Finally, the chest shook once, then fell silent. The shadows retreated. The room returned to an eerie stillness. Thomas collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. It's contained. For now. But only temporarily. The entity, it will try again. It always does. Elias lowered the chisel, chest heaving. So, we stop it by hiding it. Thomas shook his head. By understanding it. By cutting all anchors. By making sure no one else can stumble into its traps. Its strength comes from attention, from connection, every human who witnesses it gives it power. We've weakened it tonight. But the fight isn't over. Marin's hands shook. We could have died. All of us. Elias glanced at Thomas. You already did. Almost. And now you're alive, or at least, partially alive. Thomas managed a weak smile. Partially human, yes. But the entity can never fully control me again. Not after tonight. And you've seen it, survived it. That makes you part of the story too. Elias's heart sank. What story? Thomas's eyes, once human, now lined with shadows, met his. The story of what haunts this city, what walks unseen, and what refuses to die. You survived, but now you are part of the network. Part of its history. And you must be vigilant. Always. The wind moaned outside. A chill ran through the room, but the mist in the chest remained dormant. For the first time, the trio could breathe, though each knew that peace was only temporary. Marin approached Elias. So, what now? He glanced at Thomas, at the chest, at the snow-covered cemetery outside. Now, we prepare. We document. We warn. Boston may think it's over, but the entity, it never sleeps. And next time, it might be smarter, faster, stronger. It will come for another anchor. And maybe, it will choose one of us. Thomas nodded gravely. And when it does, we will be ready. We've learned its pattern. We've faced its power. And we know the truth, the statues, the corpses, the shadows, they were never the true enemy. The enemy is older, deeper, and it waits for the unprepared. Marin swallowed hard. Then we make sure no one else gets caught. No more anchors. Elias clenched the chisel. Exactly. Tonight, it's contained. Tomorrow, we hunt its traces. We end it completely. Or at least, weaken it enough that Boston can survive until the next anchor appears. Thomas leaned on Elias and Marin, weak but steady. Remember, always, its eyes are everywhere. Even when you think it's gone, it watches. Outside, the wind shifted again. Snow swirled. And in the distance, faint shadows moved among the gravestones. Elias whispered, almost to himself, it's still out there, waiting, but we're ready. Marin nodded, gripping his hand. Let it come. We'll be waiting. And somewhere, deep in the darkness beyond the cemetery, the entity pulsed and whispered, faintly. Anchor, awake, next. The trio stood among shattered tombstones, victorious yet aware that this victory was temporary. They had survived the horror, unraveled the mystery, and faced the entity. But the shadows lingered, and Boston slept unaware of the darkness waiting to rise again. Elias looked at Thomas, then at Marin, and then at the chest containing the entity. His fingers brushed the broken chisel. His jaw tightened. It's over for tonight, but it will return. And with that, they disappeared into the snowy night, the cemetery silent once more, save for whispers carried on the wind. A year had passed since the nightmare in the Bellamy Cemetery, the night the entity, the shadow that had haunted them, had been partially contained within the metal chest. Snow had long melted, leaving the graves slick with mud and frost in the early hours of December. Boston appeared normal, bustling with people oblivious to the darkness lingering in the spaces between tombstones and alleys. Yet for Elias, Marin, and Thomas, normalcy had become a fragile illusion, like fog that could lift and reveal monsters hiding beneath. Elias walked the perimeter of the cemetery at dusk, the winter air biting at his cheeks. Marin stayed close, her hands buried in her coat pockets, eyes constantly scanning the shadows. Thomas, always slightly behind them, moved with measured caution, his gaze flickering between gravestones as though he could see the entity's whispers trailing along the frozen earth. None spoke. Words felt inadequate, silence carried a weight heavier than any confession. The cemetery had changed over the year. New stones had been placed, older ones restored, and the grounds kept neat. But Elias noticed subtle differences, the slight tilt of certain gravestones, the faint impressions in the soil that seemed too deliberate, patterns that weren't there before. It was as if the entity's presence had seeped into the land itself, leaving fingerprints in its wake. A cold wind stirred, rustling the bare branches of the skeletal trees. Elias froze. He felt it first, a subtle shift in the air, a pulse of malevolence threading through the quiet. He wasn't imagining it. The entity was near. Do you feel that? Elias whispered. Marin nodded, tightening her grip on the small flashlight she carried. Yes. It's waiting. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm she tried to maintain. From the far corner of the cemetery, a shadow detached itself from a gravestone. Elias tensed. It wasn't the statue anymore, that vessel had been destroyed. This was something different, something alive and conscious, yet otherworldly. Its movement was subtle at first, a faint ripple in the air, like smoke drifting against the wind. Then it solidified, taking the vague shape of a man. Its face was featureless, yet Elias could sense eyes, black and glimmering, focused directly on them. Thomas stepped forward, speaking in a low, measured tone. "It's testing us. It knows we survived. It's probing, gathering strength." The shadow moved closer, its form shifting unnaturally. It mimicked the shapes of gravestones, bending light and shadow to obscure its true form. The wind carried whispers, a chorus of distorted voices: Thomas, Isadora, the countless souls that had been consumed or manipulated by the entity over decades. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. "Anchor," the entity's voice hissed, not through sound, but through thought, threading directly into their minds. "Anchor, awake, mine, yours." Elias gripped the broken chisel tighter. The metal felt cold, almost alive in his hands. "We're ready," he said, though his voice betrayed the tremor in his chest. The shadow stopped, observing them. Elias noticed subtle flickers of black energy around its edges, remnants of the entity's past forms, the statue, Thomas, and even faint traces of Isadora herself. It had evolved. It no longer relied on a single host, it could divide itself, project fragments, test multiple forms simultaneously. Marin whispered, "It's smarter. Stronger. And it knows we're afraid." Thomas nodded grimly. "Containment was never permanent. We only delayed it. The entity learns, adapts, waits for the right opportunity. Tonight, we face the consequences of our survival." The shadow lunged, not violently, but in sudden bursts, probing the limits of space, testing their reactions. Elias swung the chisel, striking the edge of one fragment, but it passed through harmlessly, like smoke slipping through fingers. The entity hissed in response, a sound that twisted reality around them. Snow swirled in unnatural currents, gravestones groaning as if the land itself resented their intrusion. Elias realized then that they were dealing with a predator unlike any other, a force that could bend matter, invade minds, and exploit fear. The entity's eyes, if they were eyes, glimmered through every shadow, watching, calculating. Thomas took a deep breath. "We need to force it into a vessel. Only then can we weaken it." Elias's heart raced. "A vessel? But we only have the chest again, and that was barely enough last time." Thomas's eyes hardened. "It's the only option. But this time, we must prepare. We need energy, focus, and a way to draw all fragments into a single point. Otherwise," his voice faltered, "it will disperse, and Boston will be filled with anchors." Marin swallowed hard. "How do we even start? It can split, change, possess anything now." Thomas gestured toward the gravestones surrounding them. "We create a circle. All fragments must be forced into one location. Use the chisel to mark the points. Channel the energy into the chest. And, we must resist. No fear, no hesitation. Otherwise," he trailed off, shuddering. Elias nodded. "Then let's do it." They moved methodically, marking a circle in the mud around the central tombstone with the chisel. Black mist swirled at their edges, testing, teasing, probing their minds. Each movement of the chisel elicited a reaction from the shadow, ripples in its form, shrieks of frustration, tendrils of darkness flaring. Marin's hands shook as she helped anchor the circle. "I never thought it could be like this, everywhere, in everything." Elias's teeth gritted. "Focus. Channel. We do not falter." The wind picked up, carrying faint whispers from the gravestones themselves. The shadows of past victims flickered and merged, a collective consciousness guiding the entity. Elias could hear them all, the screams of Thomas, Isadora's laughter, countless others lost to the entity. It lunged, fragmented forms darting toward them from multiple directions. Elias swung the chisel again, striking at the nearest fragment. Sparks of black and blue energy collided, ripping through the air, creating bursts of cold wind. Marin fired her flashlight at another, and the beam forced the mist to recoil. Thomas began chanting, his voice steady, drawing patterns in the air with his hands. The fragments screamed, twisting, merging, and separating again, faster than Elias could track. He felt tendrils of thought, probing his mind, whispering fears, memories, doubts. He shut his eyes briefly and focused on one thing: survival. Focus. Resistance. The fragments converged slowly, drawn toward the central tombstone where the circle had been drawn. Elias struck the chisel into the ground repeatedly, each strike sending pulses of energy, corralling the shadows. Marin's flashlight created barriers of light, forcing the fragments to retreat and merge into the central point. Thomas's chanting intensified, voices echoing off the gravestones like a chorus of power. At last, the fragments were forced together, twisting, writhing, screaming as one. The mist surged upward, drawn into the metal chest they had brought from the old Bellamy house. Elias shoved the chest into the center of the circle, and Thomas completed the final chant. The chest shook violently, rattling like it contained a storm. Elias and Marin held it steady, teeth gritted, muscles trembling. The shadows screamed, the ground trembled, and for a moment, the entire cemetery seemed to pulse with energy. Then, with a final, deafening scream, the fragments were drawn into the chest. Silence. Elias, Marin, and Thomas collapsed to their knees, gasping. The chest lay still, the black energy faintly glowing within. Outside, the wind calmed. The whispers faded. The shadows receded. Thomas exhaled, finally relaxing slightly. It's contained. For now. But only temporarily. The entity, it will try again. It always does. Elias shook his head. One day, it'll find another anchor. And next time, it might not be just fragments. It might be stronger, faster. Thomas nodded. And we will be ready. We've learned its pattern. We've faced its power. We know the truth, the entity uses anchors, connections, and attention. We've broken one cycle. The rest depends on vigilance. Marin looked down at the chest. So this keeps it trapped. For how long? Thomas's gaze was grave. Until it finds a new anchor, or until someone learns the ritual to destroy it completely. Until then. Boston sleeps, unaware, but we do not. Not ever. Elias placed his hand on the chest, feeling the faint pulse of energy beneath the metal. He swallowed hard. We fight it if it comes again. That's our role now. Thomas rested a hand on his shoulder. Exactly. Remember, its eyes are everywhere, even when you think it's gone. And when it returns, it will be watching. The trio rose to their feet, looking around the cemetery, the night silent and cold. The shadows of the past lingered, but for tonight, at least, they had survived. The entity was contained, its fragments bound, its power diminished. Yet Elias knew deep down that this victory was only temporary. Somewhere, beyond the gravestones, hidden in the dark corners of Boston, the entity waited, whispering, growing, watching. And when the next anchor awoke, it would strike again. Boston streets were quiet, colder than usual, the winter wind slicing through the empty alleyways like sharp knives. The city slept, oblivious to the unseen predator that had lain dormant for a year. But for Elias, Marin, and Thomas, there was no sleep, never sleep. The entity they had contained in the Bellamy chest pulsed faintly with dark energy in the hidden room where Thomas had secured it. Its whispers seeped into their dreams, taunting, planning, testing. Tonight was different. They could feel it. Something primal, angry, and far stronger than before. The containment chest vibrated in its hiding place, and Thomas's knuckles whitened as he gripped it. It's awake. Finally, he said, voice tight with anticipation. Elias and Marin exchanged a glance. They had anticipated this day, prepared for it, and yet fear coiled in their stomachs like a living thing. How long do we have? Elias asked, tightening the strap around the chest. Thomas exhaled slowly. Minutes, maybe hours. When it strikes, it won't just test us. It will consume. It will take anchors. It will spread through the city. And if it escapes, Boston won't survive. Marin swallowed hard. Then we finish it tonight. No hesitation. No mistakes. Elias nodded, chest tightening. We've come too far to let it win. The trio moved silently through the snowy streets, heading toward the cemetery, the entity's origin and the focal point of its power. Each step seemed to pulse with electricity, the shadows lengthening unnaturally in their path. Gravestones and trees appeared to lean toward them as if anticipating their arrival. As they approached the Bellamy cemetery, the snow shifted beneath their feet, and the temperature dropped sharply. A faint black mist swirled among the tombstones, almost imperceptibly at first, then coalescing into the shape of the entity. It had learned since last year. No longer limited to fragments, it now shimmered with power, a mass of shifting shadows, obsidian eyes flashing across its form. Elias gripped the broken chisel, Marin raised the flashlight, and Thomas held the chest tightly. The entity's whispers slithered into their minds. Anchor, awake, mine, yours. Boston, mine. Suddenly, the mist lunged toward them. This time it wasn't testing, they were under attack. Tendrils of darkness shot out, wrapping around their limbs, trying to pull them into the cold, pulsing mass. Marin fired the flashlight repeatedly, the light cutting through the mist but only slowing it. Elias swung the chisel, striking the entity. Sparks of black and blue energy erupted, illuminating the cemetery in bursts of violent light. The entity shrieked, a sound that split the silence, bending reality around them. Thomas chanted, repeating the ritual he had memorized, his voice firm and unwavering, weaving protective wards as the mist recoiled. The entity surged, faster, stronger. It reached for the chest in Thomas's hands, tendrils lashing like living shadows. Give me the anchor, it hissed, voice layered with every tone Thomas, Isadora, and countless victims had ever made. Elias lunged forward, striking the entity with the chisel. Blue sparks erupted on contact, and the shadow screeched in frustration. Marin grabbed the chest from Thomas, holding it high, while Elias and Thomas worked together to draw the entity into the circle of snow-marked wards they had prepared earlier. The entity resisted violently, writhing, splitting, merging again and again. Its voice twisted inside their heads, screaming fears, doubts, and visions of death. Elias staggered under the weight of the psychic assault. He saw flashes of his friends, of Marin being consumed, of Thomas becoming nothing more than another host. Hold the circle. Thomas shouted. We force it into the chest, or it spreads. Marin's arms shook as she held the chest in place. Elias struck with the chisel again, repeating the rhythm of the ritual. Each strike pulsed energy into the wards, forcing the entity's fragmented forms closer to the metal chest. Suddenly, the entity coalesced into a singular humanoid shape, towering, eyes flashing, darkness dripping from its limbs. It raised a hand, and the air itself twisted, snow freezing midair, ice forming along the edges of the tombstones. You cannot contain me, it bellowed, voice echoing across the cemetery like a chorus of all the dead it had consumed. Elias gritted his teeth. We can and we will. He plunged the chisel into the entity's chest, striking a weak point where Thomas's ritual had marked. The entity shrieked, energy surging outward in waves that threw Elias and Marin backward. Thomas chanted faster, faster, louder, forcing the entity's fragmented consciousness to focus on the wards. The shadows clawed at reality, tearing at the air, trying to escape, but Elias, Marin, and Thomas held firm. Sparks of energy exploded as the entity's tendril struck the circle, but every pulse only pushed it closer to the chest. The mist writhed violently, then, finally, it began to collapse into the container, drawn by the ritual's force and the trio's will. Elias grabbed Marin's hand. Now. Seal it, he shouted. Marin slammed the chest closed. It rattled violently, a low growl emanating from within, then silence. The snow stilled. The shadows retreated. The wind ceased, and the cemetery was quiet once again. The three collapsed to their knees, gasping, shivering. Thomas exhaled, finally allowing himself a small measure of relief. It's contained, fully, this time. The anchors are broken. It cannot escape. Elias lowered the chisel, trembling. Is it gone? Thomas shook his head. Gone. No. Dormant. Waiting. But it no longer has power here. We've severed the network. This city, Boston, is safe. For now. Marin placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. We did it. We actually did it. Thomas looked at her with weary eyes. We did. But the story doesn't end. The entity's reach is far beyond this cemetery, far beyond Boston. There will be others. But we've delayed it. And we've learned how to fight. Elias looked around at the cemetery, snow glistening under the moonlight, shadows retreating. He felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Then we survive. And if it ever comes back, we'll be ready. The three stood, facing the chest that now held the dormant entity. Elias whispered, almost to himself, it's over, for now. Boston sleeps tonight, unaware, but we won't forget. We'll guard this city from the shadows. Thomas nodded. The entity may rise again, but not here. Not while we stand. Marin exhaled slowly, snow falling from her hair. Then we wait, and we watch. Always. The wind shifted, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible whisper from the chest. The entity was contained, but not destroyed. Its darkness pulsed faintly, reminding them of its enduring power. Elias glanced at Thomas and Marin. One day, someone else might stumble upon this, and they won't know what to do. Thomas's eyes hardened. Then it will be up to us, until we can destroy it completely. Until then, the shadows follow, and we remain vigilant. For the first time in over a year, the trio left the cemetery together, walking through Boston's empty streets, shadows stretching behind them. They had survived, fought the unimaginable, and contained the entity that had haunted generations. The chest remained behind, silent, a dark reminder that evil never truly dies, it only waits, biding its time. And somewhere in the silent night, hidden from the city's sleeping inhabitants, the entity pulsed, dormant yet alive, whispering faintly. Next anchor, awake, mine. Elias, Marin, and Thomas disappeared into the snowy streets, knowing the city was safe for tonight. But Boston would always carry the memory of what lurked in its cemeteries, waiting for the curious, the careless, and the unlucky. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, the entity waited. Patient. Calculating. Eternal.